That's interesting. So what's the vision on BarnWiz? What's the elevator pitch? So if you and I are just meeting for the first time, like give me the breakdown of what is BarnWiz.
So BarnWiz is an online platform to find and book horse activities, lessons, boarding, training in one place on your app in a phone.
And when you're putting that together, that kind of using that vernacular, using that kind of pitch, if you will, and really just developing the platform, how do you recognize, okay, this is what I should be doing now versus maybe this is where it'll be in the future? Like, how did you come up with those 2 or 3 things that you decided that's how we're going to recruit kind of the early stage customers of BarnWiz?
Well, early on in developing BarnWiz, from my vision of it, just want a digital way to find a trainer that's qualified. I participated in the Virginia ICAP program, which I'm sure you guys are well familiar with and talk about it. And so that really taught me and our team, how to go and validate ideas that we think are important to how we build out our roadmap from a technology perspective. And so we have instilled that energy, that reasoning into how we map our roadmap. So every idea, we will go and we will talk to people in the industry. We'll go into tack stores, we'll go into feed stores, we'll go to horse shows, and we'll just have a hypothesis of, for example, people are going to use Google to find a new trainer, and we'll say that's number 1. Number 2 is going to be phone a friend, and number 3 maybe is going to be a horse show, seeing results. And then we'll go out and we'll just generally ask, how do you find a trainer? What are the steps you take? And people will tell us the first thing they do. And what was amazing in learning this tool, and I'm so grateful we did, is our hypothesis is mostly close to the answer that the customer that wants and how they validate what they would use, but it's almost always slightly off. And I think that's a really important concept. You don't know everything, and your customer doesn't always know everything either. But I think the combination between the two really help. And so where we see that roadmap, we are committed to validating it with our audience.
How do you validate that to ensure that the customer will be able to become a user, become someone that actually pays the business and not just someone who says something, right? And so the example I'll give is, way back when, actually, I just tweeted about this a couple of days ago. In 2013, I was thinking about writing a book, and I paid $5 for a cover on Fiverr. And it was like the things that I've done from a marketing perspective to make for $5 or less or something like that. And the whole thing was, if I can sell an amount of copies that I feel is worth it, I will write the book. I sold 1 copy, so I didn't write the book. Now, technically, I wrote the book probably 5 years later when I had sold a lot more copies with a different name and a little bit more strategy behind that. But how do you validate that what people are telling you is actually going to be valuable for your business and not just chitter chatter?
So I also think it's important to get early adopters committed to signing up to use your platform. And so that's, we don't just generally ask questions. We engage with people. We start, well, would you be interested if we created this? And would you be willing to pay at this price? And are you interested in being an early adopter? And so I think, and Zack, to your point, I mean, nothing tells you more than a paying customer.
What was it difficult for you to get out and start asking those first people questions? I mean, well, what I have seen is that so many founders they're just deathly afraid,
terrified
to talk to potential users because what if they tell me that I'm not solving the problem, or that they're not interested,
or their baby's ugly,
right? Was that difficult for you? And if so, how did you get past it?
I mean, I think the good thing about my background is that I've spent 20 years in selling healthcare tools. And a lot of that job was consultative work. And so I'm very used to people pushing back on technology or, ideas. And so I have that going for me, where I sort of maybe have a little bit of a thicker armor in being willing to talk to people. But second of all, this is the industry I love and I know a lot about. And so it's like, well, how do you run it? And I'm genuinely curious about how they run their business or how they operate. And I think that probably helps. I find people, it's like dog people, they're just like, oh, you're a horse person. Okay. And they're willing to share. And so, I think that came a little bit more naturally to me, and than maybe other people that are entering a market that they really are guessing is a good market but haven't been in before.
You talked about thick skin, and I think it's interesting of that. So I've recently started running. Tim is a big time runner, and I'm constantly looking at feedback. I know that I'm terrible. Right. And so it's like I go into the process of that wanting more, right, where I'm sharing this, and I'll share it with Tim. Right. So I'll send him like this run. Hey, I just went on this run. I did this. This was my speed. This is how I looked. This is how I felt. And I'm openly asking for that feedback. Do you feel like it sounds like that's similar in this case, where you're openly wanting that feedback? You are very passionate about it, and because of that, that's allowing you to actually get a better result out of it. Are we kind of on the same page there, you think?
I think so, definitely. I mean, I know enough about software that it's never done, right? So, and it always changes. And so I think
you'd be surprised at how many people don't think that.
Yeah. I mean, it helps that I have a software background, right? So, creating these software, and my job started before Y2K. So my job was to take hospitals from a paper system to an electronic system. And what that meant is I had to standardize or help them standardize all the documentation. And it's very much like, trying to standardize the horse industry, actually. Right. So, and there was a ton of pushback, and you're talking about pushback from doctors and, people that absolutely believe in the way they're doing it is the right way. And that, they shouldn't change their operative report because it has exactly the right information in it. And the way that it's laid out is exactly right. And unfortunately there was 15 of them in a hospital and you can only have one. And so, so there's definitely things I learned very young in my career of negotiating and navigating, people's opinions to help the collective standard.
Well, and there could be more than one right answer for something.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've always loved meeting founders with sales type of backgrounds because they're not afraid of that no. It's like, hey, the sooner we get to know, the sooner I can move on to the next potential customer. And I love that aspect. And so many founders are not that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're too tied to it. They get emotionally tied to it. And it's like, hey, like this, you're building this thing. Yes, you're doing it for a plethora of different reasons, but the people who are acquiring this, people who are buying it, the people who are using it are the ones that you need to get those answers for. And you might have to massage and shift your mindset and thoughts on that to make it succeed.
Yeah, I would love to hear what you guys think about this. I've been involved with 1 Million Cups locally for years, and I see a lot of founders come through 1 Million Cups, and I really believe that there's an emotional evolution to owning a business. And early on, I think founders in that like immature state are very closed to new ideas, know what they have, are very interested in closing off who knows about it. It's secretive. They don't want it to get out. It could get stolen. They're very worried about it. And I think as you emotionally mature, you realize how hard it is to build a business and how it really, you want everybody's ideas because one idea. And I keep saying, I'm going to write a book about the emotional evolution that founders have to go through because I truly believe there is something to it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, it's, and Zach, you should feel free to share your thoughts, but it's totally counterintuitive.
Mhm.
So much of business is counterintuitive, just in terms of, like, to your point, Tori, it's, you can tell everybody your idea, but it's like, unless they have someone else has the same passion, the same background, the same, just desire to solve that problem, no one is going to be able to do it,
Mhm.
and do it better than you are. Um, just in terms of, like, not every customer is the ideal customer for you. You really have to narrow down and segment and identify who your true customer is, because otherwise, then you're going to have a customer, or a client that doesn't fit your business, and then you're going to be spending 80% of your time on a customer that you shouldn't have taken on to begin with. So there's just so many aspects that I find it completely counterintuitive.
So I wrote down 3 things as to why I think this is the case of why it is.
Okay.
And that case being people being immature of not knowing what their business really is, and just to piggyback off what you said, and I agree, Tim. Number one is business schools. I feel like business schools are usually historically outdated. A lot of those people have never actually run a business. They are more managers and MBAs of businesses, which are important things, but they're a very different thing in my mind. Like, people will get mad at Elon Musk, who will say something because does he have a business degree? Does he have an MBA? You know, he said something at some point, Tim, and people are like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. Well, he's one of the most brilliant minds in the world. It's like, come on, you got to respect that. So business schools, I feel like there's a lot of education taught around stuff where it's not actually getting your hands dirty. And I think you have to get your hands dirty to actually see what's going to happen in that world. Number 2 is Hollywood. I think Hollywood has pushed some of this narrative to make it seem like, oh, this is the way that it's supposed to be. You know, you could say the Facebook movie. Who knows how much of that is actually true, and who really cares? Because it's very difficult to become, a $50 billion business. Most businesses don't want to be a $50 billion business. And number 3 is you hear the word of mouth, this people watching Shark Tank, all that kind of stuff of non-business owners getting into the narrative saying, oh, you should do this. Well, you've never done that yourself. So you have to be careful in there. And the last example I'll give is just people saying, oh, well, what about your competition? You really almost never need to worry about your competition, in my opinion, right? Some of the biggest businesses in the world literally will just go across the street from someone else and say, hey, cool. Like, we actually realized that when there's a Burger King, a McDonald's, and a Wendy's across the street from each other, all of us are going to do well. Why are Rite Aid and Walgreens on the opposite corners of each other? Because they realize that density is important. Yet, if we really push the competition word, you would never think that density of businesses that are similar to each other is important. Yet, look at a shopping mall, look at the internet. Like, these are all things where a collection of businesses that are all quote unquote competition, you would think in theory is the wrong thing, where actually it's the reason why more businesses succeed. And so I think when you kind of put all that together into a run-on sentence like I'm doing right now, I think you realize why people have that kind of opinion of whatever got this whole thing started.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, but it's interesting in the sense of, and a lot of it comes down to speed, and you're able to react to the market. And it's interesting, and it's not necessarily a dig at business schools and universities, but I mean, it's funny talking to people within the education industry, and they just talk about how slow they move. And I mean, it's one of the biggest pain points that business schools have is just they're so slow.
Well,
so
and
if it's so
they never talk about like how to actually do an actual task. They just talk about it in theory. And how that's why I think she's been so successful in the sales aspect of it, because she knows how to talk.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just like, if it's super slow just to hire someone or change the curriculum, I mean, it just I mean, therefore, like, one of the big things at business school, I mean, they teach, outsourcing everything, just in time, supply chains and everything else. Whereas then you got someone like Elon that comes in and says, no, we're going to vertically integrate everything and do everything in-house. And everyone was like, my gosh, this dude is like set up for failure. He's totally going against the grain on everything. And now we're like in this supply chain crisis that we have, and Tesla's vertically integrated, and they're the only car manufacturer right now that's producing anything. and because they're vertically integrated, and they've just completely changed the landscape. I mean, it's just it's wild. It's wild to think.
I think most people are afraid to ask why. Like, why do we do it this way? Why do we have to do it that way? What happens if we do it some way different? And I worked for IBM for 9 years, and that was such an interesting company to work for because they were like working for the government. So, they really didn't want to change it. It's really hard for someone like me that wants to move fast and wants to do something to try to get them to move, because it was a committee decision. And I think, fortunately, I have parents that have been entrepreneurs and grandparents that have been entrepreneurs. So it's sort of this legacy of entrepreneurs that I've lived with. And so speed was always what they needed, right? If something wasn't selling at a trade show, literally in real time have to redo their booth so that it's more attractive visually, and so that it sells more. And so little things like that, I think, really have helped me understand how to just keep asking questions, not just of, are we selling the right thing, but is this the right way to approach the product for the industry? And I just think it's so important to stay connected to your customer, because they're the one that is always making the decision and is always spreading the word about your product and about what you're doing. And I think referrals are, to your $5 marketing point, Zach, the referrals are so strong.
Yeah, and to circle back around before we get too far away from it, I mean, I always recommend to a lot of founders, almost all founders that I meet, your 1 Million Cups is just what a great place to introduce your idea and get some validation. I mean, you're in a super non-threatening audience that people truly want to help you and give you great feedback, and they're not going to laugh you off stage, but go there, take your 7 minutes, share your idea, and those are the first 20, 30, 40 people, however many people are in the audience, that are going to give you customer feedback, so to speak. So that's a great place to start.
And it's good practice.
Yeah, it is. But I think the great thing about 1 Million Cups is it's a mentor, sort of like this mentoring platform every Wednesday morning at 9 in your local city, where it is a very friendly, entrepreneurial, audience. And so I don't think enough people early on know about it and know the value of it, for sure. And I think you're right. It's such a good tool to validate where they're going, and then there's not a need to share business cards in the sense of spreading leads. It's really a tool to help solve.
You back?
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if my internet's going in and out, but anyway. So yeah, it's really a great tool for business challenges.
Sure. I feel like a lot of people, maybe first-time business owners, first-time entrepreneurs, have this thought, whether it's them or just the general public around them, that if you're a business owner, you're successful, you're very wealthy, and things like that. And maybe that's why they don't jump on things like that, because they don't actually see the value yet, because they haven't experienced how difficult it is to make your first sale, your 10th sale, your 100th sale, something like that. And so it's interesting. You articulated a way that made me think, oh, well, I guess people just think that if you own a business, you're super successful, but the data definitely proves that wrong. So just words of, well, just a thought for me. Your